Gordon Johncock continues to lead here in Milwaukee. Roger, of course, from Bakersfield, California, driving that Machinist Union Special. Car number 31, it's all over for Roger. Gordon Johncock from Coldwater, Michigan, formerly from Phoenix, Arizona. He, of course, originated his racing career in Hastings, Michigan, is the leader in the Rex Mays 150. We have not talked much about this racetrack. For those of you unfamiliar with it, it is a 1-mile racetrack, and the turns are not banked very much. Gary Lee has moved over to talk to Roger Mears. Gary?
Roger still has the helmet on. Let's see if we can hear what seems to be the problem.
We got a bad oil leak. Just started a couple laps ago, and we can't tell yet what it is. Guys are trying to figure it out.
I don't know how much you can pick up. Roger says it's a bad oil leak. They're not sure exactly what the problem is. Came very, very early as the race began. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
So Roger Mears will keep that helmet on until they can determine whether or not the problem is terminal. We will be back with more has dropped out of competition with engine problems. This is Rick Mears. Very briefly, now we're back to this race for third place involving Mario Andretti and Pancho Carter.
Pancho Carter, maybe one of the best short track drivers in history, makes a move as he goes to the inside of Andretti. Bill Vukovich is in that group with that trio, and Carter uses the slower running Vukovich almost as a pulling guard and is able to sneak underneath Andretti. Pancho Carter moves into the number 3 position now as he gets around Mario.
Well, Milwaukee has always afforded some tremendous racing, and this race is no exception. There are not very many grooves out there in those short turns. There is maybe 2, but no more than that, and it's very difficult to pass on this racetrack at some times. That was a perfect example of how it's done. Pancho Carter going around Mario Andretti and moving into third position. The leader continues to be Gordon Johncock. Second place belongs to Rick Mears. Carter is third. Fourth is Mario Andretti, and running in fifth place is Tom Sneva.
Sneva has been running smoothly all day in George Bignotti's creation. Of course, Bignotti and Sneva were 2 of the people that introduced the March chassis to Indianapolis car racing in 1981. The March chassis has become the most prolific of all the chassis available and running in terms of Indianapolis car racing. There's Tom Sneva in the white, red, and black trim. Number 7 is the Texaco Star car running in 5th position. Gordon Smiley earlier this year in making reference to the March chassis called the March simply the best commercially available Indianapolis type car. You can't go down and buy a Penske PC-10 or a Petrick Wildcat.
Gordon Johncock has been running pretty much by himself out there on the racetrack in the past few laps. Consequently, he has increased his lead over Rick Mears to more than 8.5 seconds. So Gordon Johncock continuing to stretch out the lead just a little bit.
There is Gordon Johncock getting ready to put a lap on Johnny Rutherford. There's a team that's been struggling a little bit. They continue to be competitive, run top 5, but they can't get close to victory lane.
Well, Pancho Carter, of course, came up to the IndyCar ranks through the sprint cars and the midgets. And we had an opportunity to ask him about his experience gaining in sprint cars and whether it applies to this racetrack.
I think that it does, because this is a track where you really got to be able to finesse the car a little bit, but you have to be able to hustle the car. And to get through traffic on a short track like Milwaukee here, you really have to know how to work your competitors to be able to take advantage of their weakness. And I think that's where driving the upright, open-wheel cars, the midgets, the sprint cars, and the dirt cars definitely pay off in being able to race hard during the race.
Well, of course, Pancho Carter, the driver of that car, but we should also give some credit to the chief mechanic on this car, Johnny Caples himself, a former race driver who has done a tremendous job in preparing this car for every race.
Bob, among the front runners, there's probably fewer dollars invested in the Alex Morales team than any of the others. And between Pancho Carter and Johnny Caples, that may be the best bargain of those cars running up front.
And Mario Andretti and Tom Sneva have gotten together out there on the racetrack. We've been noticing in the past few laps, Mario Andretti dropping back just a little bit. At the same time, Tom Sneva moving up. So this is the battle for fourth position involving the number 40 STP car driven by Mario Andretti and the Texaco Star piloted by Tom Sneva.
Very few of the drivers who have run ovals their entire career have been fortunate enough to spend most of their race driving career in a rear engine car. But Tom Sneva is one of those rare exceptions. He actually began driving rear engine super modified cars in his native Pacific Northwest. As Sneva gets underneath Mario Andretti, Mario drifted out just a little bit between turn 3 and 4, and Tom Sneva nosed underneath as they headed toward the front stretch. We were commenting that Sneva has run rear-engine super modified cars almost from the inception of his career, winning many, many times in the Jim Tipke-built cars back in the Pacific Northwest.
Tom Sneva was telling us earlier this weekend that he wasn't really happy with the way that car was performing. They're still having a problem dialing in the chassis, but he's showing this afternoon that perhaps he has those problems taken care of. He has moved into 4th position now, passing Mario Andretti. The leader continues to be Gordon Johncock. In 2nd place is Rick Mears. 3rd, Pancho Carter. 4th now is Tom Sneva. And 5th is Mario Andretti. In 6th position is A.J. Foyt. And then comes Johnny Rutherford, but he has already been lapped. We will return for more live coverage of the Rex Mays 150 from State Fair Park in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Inner and driver combination, Johnny Rutherford from Fort Worth, Texas, and Rutherford has just made a pit stop. We anticipate that perhaps the other leaders will be coming in very, very soon. Rutherford started 6th, is currently in 7th position, but has lost a lap to the leaders.
Well, this was the super team of 1980, and technology and the experience of the other teams on the trail have really caught up with the Chaparral people. And I'm talking with Johnny Rutherford this week here at Milwaukee as another one of our leaders.
Rick Mears is pitting. Our 2nd place driver is into the pit area, and they have chosen, the Penske team has, to pit those cars at the very front of the pit area, up towards turn number 4. So we'll see this pit stop here by Rick Mears.
Pancho Carter is coming in very slowly. Just a theory, they may have pushed their fuel consumption a little further than they should have. Pancho rolling very slowly.
And Mears has stalled the engine. Mears has stalled the engine trying to get out of the pit area, and this is going to cost Rick Mears dearly. Now they have the car started again, and there goes Rick Mears, but he lost some valuable time in the pit area as that car stalled. Now here is Pancho Carter, who came in very slowly. We think maybe he was out of fuel. Something was wrong with the car. He's in there now with the pit men working on the right side of the car, changing the rubber, and also the fuel being topped off. And Pancho Carter still in there. It's been more than 22 seconds. Apparently that car was out of fuel because they're taking a long time getting it full of fuel. Of course, there are new fueling procedures in effect for the kart races this year. Now they have it full, but it looks like that Carter also may have stalled the engine because he's still in the pit area.
Well, we went 60 laps or thereabouts before the leaders began to pit, and boy, an agonizing delay here in the race plans for Johnny Caples and Pancho Carter. There's the man who has led this race, Gordon Johncock, as he appears to be still out on the racetrack and not quite ready to come in. He's still blasting around at the green flag speed. They're not gotten Carter away yet. Finally, after pushing that car about half the length of the pit area, Pancho Carter back out at speed.
Well, it's a tough luck for Pancho. There's a good look at him as he was doing well, running in 3rd place when this pit stop occurred, and he lost some very valuable time, as did Rick Mears. Gary Lee perhaps can shed more light on these latest series of pit stops. Gary?
We were just talking with Roger Penske of the Rick Mears crew. He said Rick simply stalled the engine going out. That prolonged the pit stop. Right now we're headed to the far end of the pit area to check on the situation of car number 3, driven by Pancho Carter.
All right, and there is Mario Andretti in the pits. The leader of the race, Gordon Johncock, has not made a pit stop. He is still out there on the racetrack. He is over in the back stretch. We'll be keeping our eye on him to see if he does come in this time. But his teammate, Mario Andretti, is in right now. Mario Andretti has finished 2nd, 11th, and 31st in the 3 starts on the kart trail, and he also has killed that engine trying to get out of the pit area. So 3 of the lead cars have had problems in and out.
Well, a couple of factors here. You know, the last race on the trail is a big racetrack, and the pace is altogether different, as well as the pace in the pit area, plus the fact that we have gone this entire race without a caution flag. It's on the mind of all the drivers that they are pitting under a green flag, and they run the risk of losing a great deal of time in the pits if you have a bad stop. And I would venture to guess that's just one possible reason. Of course, the other one is just irony. Maybe it just happened that way, but we've gone completely green, and when you have a race like that, a lot of time can be lost in the pits.
These cars miles per gallon. And it looks like that Johncock is slowing down on the racetrack in turn number 3. We'll be watching that car very closely, but I think that Gordon Johncock is headed for the pits. Yes, he is. Here comes the leader. Gordon Johncock in for a stop as we watch Johnny Parsons, who's also receiving service. Here is the Johncock stop. Let's watch it, Larry.
Now remember that, of course, Gordon Johncock came in about 3 laps after his teammate Mario Andretti, and it was probably some anxious moments. Gary Lee is right on the scene.
We are indeed here as they change the 2 right side tires, refuel. They're also changing the left rear tire, which is somewhat unique here at the Milwaukee Mile. The refueling wing, they've topped him off and he's underway.
Well, that was a short pit stop for Gordon Johncock, who did not stall the engine as his other competitors did. And Gordon Johncock and Tom Sneva had the best stops during that series. But here is the new leader, A.J. Foyt.
Well, Foyt, who came to Milwaukee the first time in quite some time that he's driven in an Indianapolis car race other than Indianapolis, said he was coming here to learn and just to do some good old-fashioned racing. And boy, he has really stretched this tank of fuel that he started the race out on. Foyt has gone now almost 70 laps, and theoretically, you're not supposed to be able to go that far in an Indianapolis car. Foyt again here at Milwaukee this week, very, very fast in the straightaways. That team has a way of churning out the horsepower in any race car that A.J. Foyt sits in.
Well, A.J. Foyt started in 3rd place and finished 19th in the Indianapolis 500 this year, dropping out after 95 laps with transmission problems. But A.J. Foyt is the leader of the Rex Mays 150 at this point, and we have completed 70 laps, so we are almost half finished.
Well, Foyt continues out there, Bob, and I tell you, it's something that's beginning to puzzle me. All of the leaders now, with the exception of A.J., all those people who were able to avoid being lapped during that first 50-lap sprint like Gordon Johncock have been in, and A.J. continues to linger out on the racetrack. You know, there have been times in the past where this guy has pulled rabbits out of the hat and has led to 67 IndyCar victories in his career. Every once in a while, he pops up and surprises everybody with a secret. Does he have one here this weekend at Milwaukee?
2nd place is Gordon Johncock. 3rd place belongs to Tom Sneva. 4th is Kevin Cogan. 5th place, Rick Mears. In 6th is Pancho Carter. So those are the first 6, and the interval between A.J. Foyt and Gordon Johncock about a straightaway. There is A.J. Foyt, the living legend from Houston, Texas.
Bob, you know, that probably is an overworked phrase, but the more close that you get to A.J. Foyt, the more that you learn that that is a very accurate description. Here's a guy who is a very interesting personality, finally dipping below the yellow line coming out of turn number 4, heading for the pit area. A.J. has selected the pit just about at midstream here along pit row. He comes to a stop almost casually. Here's a race team that has just dramatic experience and extensive experience at doing whatever the driver needs. You see the full-face helmet. Gary Lee at A.J.'s pit.
Just like Gordon Johncock, he's taking on right side rubber, the left rear. The fuel is being topped off. Incidentally, as we watch A.J., we check with the Pancho Carter crew number 3. Pancho simply ran out of fuel, and it took that time to reignite the power plant in car number 3, and A.J. is away, and he almost kills it. He depresses the clutch and keeps it going. A.J. underway again.
That pit stop was about 25 seconds for A.J. Foyt, but he roars back into competition. There is the leader now, Gordon Johncock. As we have completed 74 laps, we are half finished. We'll be back with more. Gary Lee back at State Fair Park in Milwaukee, where Gordon Johncock leads the Rex Mays 150. Tom Sneva is 2nd, Rick Mears is 3rd, and Kevin Cogan is 4th. Now, the distance between Johncock and Sneva is 13.2 seconds, so it's a rather commanding lead for Gordon Johncock. Into the pit area as we watch Johncock trying to get around Jose Le Garza. Al Unser rolls into the pit area, and I'm not sure whether or not this is a scheduled stop. It could be his regular scheduled pit stop. His pit at the far end of pit lane down near turn number 1.
Al Unser, the man who has won 7 500-mile races, 3 of them at Indianapolis in his career, also closing in on $3 million in total winnings. And another of the Penske team cars comes in at the opposite end of the pits as we continue to watch Bobby Hillen's crew. There is Kevin Cogan, who had sneaked his way up to 4th position because he had not stopped yet for fuel. Bob, we ought to go to school on this. Kevin Cogan went more than half of this race before he had to stop. Kevin Cogan went 75 in about 7/8 of a lap, which means that if we don't have any cautions, this is the only stop, theoretically, he needs.
We have had no caution laps to this point. It's been all green, and Cogan is getting tremendous gas mileage, or fuel mileage, I should say, since these cars do not run on gas, but rather methanol. We have had no yellow flags, and Kevin Cogan stretching the fuel to its nth degree and completing more than half the race on a tank full.
And he had an uneventful pit stop. He wasn't particularly swift, but it was not slow either. So Cogan, at least in the race time, as far as all of the maneuvering of times in the pits and how fast you're going on the track and how long you have to stop for pits, he's well ahead of the game right now.
Well, Gordon Johncock is well ahead of the field right now in first position. Second place belongs to Tom Sneva. He moves by us right now with about a 14-second deficit on under Gordon Johncock. Third place belongs to Rick Mears. Fourth place now, I believe, would be Pancho Carter, since Kevin Cogan pitted. I believe that will put him a lap down. So those are the first four at this point. Gordon Johncock in the number 20 STP Wildcat continually. There's a good look at Gordon Johncock, who has been racing many, many years, but perhaps just now getting into his prime, as he won the Indianapolis 500, of course, in 1973 when it was rain-shortened. But it was a very sweet victory for Gordon this year because it was a full 500 miles, and believe me, he had a full day of racing.
Well, Gordon Johncock's career goes back most notably to the Super Modifieds in the early 1960s, where he was a perennial track champion at the Toledo Speedway. And incidentally, back in those days, they were running full aerial wings on top of the custom box-looking Super Modified. So Johncock had a lot of experience driving winged cars at a very early stage. One of the first groups of race cars that actually sprouted wings. They were the first cars that wings were seen on. And you know something, Bob, that it just fascinates me. Isn't it funny how just a little old Indianapolis 500-mile race victory sort of strikes up a team?
Well, Jim McGee and Gary Lee got together a little bit earlier to talk about the situation involving the double wings. You have been noticing it on the Johncock car and some of the others. Here is Gary Lee talking to crew chief Jim McGee about the situation involving the double wings.
This car in an idle position. It was resting in victory lane at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This is the STP Wildcat, driven to victory by Gordie Johncock. Team manager for Patrick Racing is Jim McGee. Jim, since the early 70s, the cars have employed the use of rear wings to add a downforce for cornering speed. Now in 1982, we see the dual wing concept. Why?
Well, we're using the dual wing at some of the shorter tracks now to take advantage of some of the air that we're getting off the bottom of the car. If you notice, they're directly behind the tunnels, and we're able to use some of the air that comes underneath the car down low to an advantage.
Okay, let's talk briefly about the ground effects. Once again, you're utilizing that low pressure center under the car to suck it down to the ground. You're also utilizing the skirts along the side of the car. Those skirts will wear off during the course of the race. What type of conditions will that provide on the race course?
It does. It creates a problem because the cars do change quite a bit, and that's why at Indianapolis, if you saw Gordie's speeds change from time to time. And so what we have to do as the race progresses, we have to keep dialing the car with the front or the rear wing to make up for the skirt wear.
Now, once the skirt wears off, will that leave any residue on the track that could make the track surface slick?
No, not at all. It just dissolves. It's like the rubber that comes off the tires. It just kind of rolls up in little balls and it gets thrown up out of the groove.
You think perhaps the ground effects may be in part responsible for the excursions we've had to the wall over in turn 2 as they go over the rough surface on the track?
No, I don't really think so. I think, you know, we've got a lot of new fellas up here, and the cars feel really good, and they're trying to go real fast. And this racetrack has always been notorious for spins and wall contact, and I think that surely the more experienced drivers haven't had the problems that some of the newer fellas have had here.
Ground effects and wings all making for faster lap times here at Milwaukee.
Gordon Johncock is turning the fastest lap. He has an 8.8-second lead on second place Tom Sneva. We'll return with more of the Rex Mays 150 in a moment on ESP. Is the leader Tom Sneva running second and Rick Mears third. Those are the only three cars on the same lap. A lap down in fourth place is Pancho Carter in car number 3. Now, Tom Sneva has been whittling away ever so slightly at the lead that Gordon Johncock has on him. It's now down to just a little over 7 seconds, so perhaps we're going to set up for a duel to the finish. One thing I think we have to talk about, Larry, at this point, since we have had no yellows during this race, is a possible new record for this 150 miles. The record is held by Mike Mosley. It was set back in June of 1976 at an hour, 14 minutes, and 2 seconds, 121.552 miles an hour. Bobby Hillen is, of course, the crew chief on Al Unser. Let's get to that interview with Gary Lee in the pit area. Gary?
Bobby Hillen, it was a mandatory, or not the mandatory, but your scheduled pit stop. He went back out, then what happened?
I think it's probably electrical problem. They took the spark plugs out, and he's getting out of the spark now. Evidently, we lost our spark plug. It didn't work.
Okay. Bobby Hillen, the owner of car number 10, being driven by Al Unser, perhaps ignition problems in car number 10.
That car is still in the pit area, and work is going on it there. This crew working on that number 10 Longhorn of Al Unser while he remains in the cockpit.
Bob, I'll tell you, if there was an award for perseverance, it would have to go to Bobby Hillen and his Longhorn racers. They have been working so hard the last couple of years to push Al Unser into victory lane, and they've had an awful lot of very disappointing setbacks. Got a news bulletin for you, Bob. The crew from Gordon Johncock has reported that Gordy has radioed to them that the engine is misfiring. Gordon Johncock conversing with his crew as he goes down the straightaways here, when you have an opportunity to check on what's going on and talk. And he tells the crew that there may be a problem developing in the engine.
Well, Tom Sneva also appears to have problems out there. That car is missing, it appeared to, as it came down the straightaway. We have been told that George Bignotti, the owner of that car, has told Tom to back off the boost just a little bit. But as we watch Tom Sneva go down the backstretch, it appears that car is not perhaps running up to speed. Maybe now it is, but as it came down in front of us here, it sounded like that engine was missing rather badly. It's still a 7.7-second lead that Johncock has on Tom Sneva.
For those of you perhaps not as familiar with racing as some of our more experienced viewers, boost, there's a little, see what boost is, there's a little button right on the dash of these cars that the driver can actually adjust, and it affects the amount of fuel flowing into the engine. And there's a very simple equation. Fuel and air mixed together give you horsepower, and the more fuel, the more air you can go in there in whatever quantity in each individual case, fuel or air, the more horsepower you get. But of course, if you're putting in more fuel, it burns it up quickly.
The interval is lengthening now between Gordon Johncock and Tom Sneva. It is 9.8 seconds, and Sneva is in trouble. I think there's very little doubt about that. He's slowing dramatically on the backstretch. Tom Sneva, the second-place car, is in trouble.
Tom Sneva, who a few laps ago appeared to have the fastest car in the racetrack, now motors silently. It doesn't look like there's any power whatsoever in the Texaco Star as it creeps around the inside of the racetrack. Sneva dropping the left rear wheels just barely onto the grass as he entered turn number 3 to stay out of the way of the faster cars coming up behind. Here at Milwaukee, with the average speeds now approaching 140 miles per hour, they'll still be around 100 miles an hour in the corners. Gary Lee is on pit row waiting for Tom Sneva to come in.
George Bignotti, what is the indication? What is the problem?
Electrical problem. I think it's missing. We got it. I don't know.
Of course, they have been in communications with the driver, and apparently there's more ignition woes in car number 7. Bob?
Well, it's been a tough season for Tom Sneva. He finished 7th at Phoenix, 17th at Atlanta, finished 4th at the Indianapolis 500-mile race. He is 13th in the kart point standings going into today's race. The crew appears to be trying to push him out, but now they pull the car back, and they install the engine again, so they're going to have to start it again.
Well, Sneva was the victim of a pit fire of all things back at Atlanta in April. He had been the 4th fastest qualifier for that race, and in Indianapolis, he was running in a challenging second position for quite a while before he had engine problems late in the race, and eventually was credited with 4th. Tom Sneva, in one of the very frustrating and agonizingly long pit stops. The seconds tick away like hours when you're sitting there.
And Tom Sneva is finally away. Meanwhile, Gordon Johncock continues now to lead this race. Jeff Brabham and Jose Le Garza being passed by Johncock in the second turn. Now down the backstretch, Johncock setting the car low into turn number 3 and 4. Johncock, of course, had handling problems during the late stages of the Indy 500 and had to run an extremely low groove on the racetrack to keep that car out of the retaining wall. And he's certainly indicated no problem with handling here this afternoon.
Bob, a couple of seconds ago, we had a glimpse of Jose Le Garza, who runs somewhere between 15th and 20th right now. It's been a very frustrating year for him also. Jose Le, of course, one of the Cinderella stories of 1981, and he shared with us this week at Milwaukee that maybe 1981 things did come just a little too easy for him. And he said, but I'm bitten. I now know what it takes to really be a race driver. I'm working very hard, and I'm here for the long haul.
47 laps to go. Gordon Johncock. Here's a race for 4th position involving Mario Andretti and A.J. Foyt, as these cars have moved very close to each other. Now A.J. Foyt at the end of the main straightaway, going low, trying to pass Mario Andretti, unable to do so. Andretti hanging on to 4th place. Andretti is in 4th. It is A.J. Foyt in 5th. Of course, the leader, Johncock. 2nd is Rick Mears, and 3rd is Pancho Carter. Now, A.J. Foyt is able to get around Mario Andretti on the back stretch and into turn number 3. So now A.J. Foyt is in 4th.
Among the active drivers of Indianapolis cars, and that is also all-time, Foyt, the #1 winningest driver of all time. He's won 67 times, and Mario Andretti is the 2nd most winning driver. Andretti has won 34, and between them, 5 Indianapolis 500-mile race.
The race is going very quickly. We have completed 107 laps again.
The city's alive 7 days of the week, and Chicagoans make every one of them special with a smooth and mellow taste of Michelob.
Michelob at Booth 1. Now that's my kind of night in the town.
Put a little weekend in your week, yeah.
Of Pocono and of California. California racetrack no longer exists, but now there is a Triple Crown because Pocono is back, and of course they have a 500-mile race at Michigan International Speedway. So in July, the Pocono 500 for championship auto racing teams once again, and we look forward to that race there in the Pocono Mountains.
Bob, you know, Gordon Johncock's superiority in this race has been so incredibly dominant that he has effectively wiped out other kinds of strategy. We talked about Kevin Cogan, for instance, going further than 75 laps or more than half of the race before he had to pit. Despite the fact that Kevin has been able to perhaps run a little faster, a little farther rather than Gordon Johncock. We see Tom Sneva going underneath Gordon Johncock. We'll pick up on that story. Sneva is 3 laps down. Remember, he had one of those long pit stops. Sneva is 3 laps now, make that 2 laps down to the leader, Gordon Johncock. But Johncock is in a position now to let Tom Sneva go by. There are less than 40 laps to go in this race, and Sneva is still 2 laps down. We were talking about Kevin Cogan. Cogan is 3 laps down to Gordon Johncock. Johncock has been so much faster that even if Kevin were to go the rest of the race without stopping, and Gordy had to stop one more time, Gordy's still going to win it.
Gordon Johncock has led for most of the event. We have had no yellow lights at this point. Racing continues, but Gordon Johncock is the dominant car and driver combination at the 1-mile Milwaukee State Fair Park Oval. Well, while we watch Gordon Johncock continue to click off the laps, and 123 laps have now been completed as Johncock crosses the start-finish line, we'll take this break and be back for the final few laps of the Rex Mays 150. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thing to work with now. We're obviously way behind. We're not running up front, but maybe we can get something organized to do a little better for the rest of the season and then have a new car when it comes to 1983.
I know you've got a lot of fans up there just as disappointed as you are right now.
Well, it's really a heartbreak because the car was not working that bad, and we were hanging right in there, and I think at the end of the day we would have come out looking pretty good, but that's the way it goes.
Lone Star JR, a spectator here at Milwaukee. Bob?
All right, and Mario Andretti blasts out of the pit area after having come in for another stop. One correction we want to make right now in regards to that Pocono 500. It is going to be held on August the 15th, not in July, as I stated earlier. August the 15th for the championship auto racing teams at Pocono International Speedway. There is your leader, Gordon Johncock. The question, Larry, will he have to make another pit stop? We have 19 laps to go.
Well, it would certainly seem like it. Most of the other top 10 cars who are still out there, I shouldn't say most, about half of them have ducked into the pits for quick gulps of fuel during the last 10 green flag laps. And I certainly would anticipate Gordy to come in, particularly with the pad that he has in the lead. At this point in time, he has at least a one-lap lead on everybody in the field, and we're showing A.J. Foyt, believe it or not, as the second running car. At this point, A.J. has had one smooth pit stop. He has run a consistent pace all afternoon. All the other people have been close to Foyt, with maybe the possible exception of Johnny Parsons Jr., who has also been in the top 10, have had problems one way or another. Engine misfiring in the racetrack or a long pit stop. Sneva was up front. He had a long pit stop. Andretti had one that was not particularly slick. And, of course, Rick Mears had his problem stalling the engine in the pits. So everybody except A.J.'s had a little bit of rockiness. A.J. and, again, Parsons, who started 10th in this race, has now found himself not exactly inheriting fourth position, but racing into fourth position. Bob, you know, I have a theory about Johnny Parsons. Not a theory, but I guess it's a statement I'd like to make. I believe that in the USAC kart leagues of Indianapolis car racing, as well as sprint car, midget, and champ dirt car racing, there is the best driver in those two ranks who has never won a championship.
We anticipate Gordon Johncock making a pit stop as the crew is being readied now. We'll watch Johncock, who is in turn number 3, and we'll see if he comes in. Jose Le Garza holds up his hand, indicating that Gordon should go around. Now, Johncock does dive toward the pit area, and Gary Lee is standing by to call this pit stop by the leader.
Gordy locks it up, slides to a stop. The refueling rig is aboard. The right side tires are being changed. They checked the left rear. The left rear is okay. The tires are on. The hose is disconnected, and Gordy is waved away. And just as we mentioned that, we can also feel a few sprinkles of rain here in the pit area.
It was a 13.3-second pit stop for Gordon Johncock. We have 15 laps to go. Johncock is going to maintain the lead. This is the way they're running. Johncock is first. A.J. Foyt is second. Running in third is Rick Mears. Fourth is Johnny Parsons. And fifth is Pancho Carter. Back in Milwaukee in a moment for the Rick Mays 150 with 10 laps to go. Johncock in turn number 3 now, running pretty much by himself. No traffic to contend with on the racetrack. Second position belongs to A.J. Foyt. Pancho Carter, who had been running in the top 3 or 4, is climbing out of the cockpit.
Well, Pancho getting out of the race car after a superlative effort. There's a team that certainly is not one of the super teams. We talked about it earlier today in terms of the dollars, but boy, I got to say they are one of the super teams in terms of efficiency of performance. A lot of people, and I may well be among them, Bob, think this guy is the greatest short track driver yet in America today. He can run the flat tracks, he can run the high bank paved ovals, he can run the high bank dirt racetracks. He has literally probably driven on more different types of racetracks than any other driver in America today, and not only driven on them, but won on every single kind.
Well, the only car on the same lap with this guy, Gordon Johncock, is A.J. Foyt, and that is because A.J. Foyt has not made the second pit stop. We'll try to get an interval here as Johncock comes down below us, crosses the start-finish line. We look out to turn number 3 now and see the second place A.J. Foyt, so it's about a half a lap at this point. We have 8 laps to go. Gordon Johncock is well on his way to victory here if things can hang together. A.J. Foyt is 15.3 seconds behind Gordon Johncock.
Bob, I'll tell you, the domination, and that is the only word with a capital D, of Gordon Johncock today has been almost startling. Not only because of the performance here today, but when you think of the first couple of races of the year, it looked like the Penske PC-10s of Mears and Kogan were going to develop to a level of invincibility during the 1981, or rather 1982 IndyCar season. But Johncock has not only been the fastest car here today, it's just been an incredible performance. He's been devastating. I tell you, a lot of people have up and down pit road got to be scratching their heads looking out there and figuring out what are they going to do now to catch the Wildcats. One factor here that has contributed, no caution flags today. It's really played into Gordy's hands.
Let's go down to Gary Lee in the pit area.
We have Lou Meyer here. Sonny is the engine builder for Gordy Johncock, and you had a consultation with Pat Patrick, the car owner, George Huning, the chief mechanic. What seems to be the problem again in the rear engine compartment?
Well, you see, we've had to run hard all day. We haven't had any yellow lights. So we bank on yellows to get our fuel mileage. I just had to report to Gordy that he's going to have to switch his injection system over to a lean condition to be able to finish because we're just about out of fuel.
So obviously, although the lead is sizable right now, there is major concern in the STP pit area.
Well, one of the STP cars, Mario Andretti, has come in and has stalled the engine once again for the second time today. Andretti will be pulled back and the starter inserted, and Andretti will be moving back out on the track, but he has had problems during pit stops.
Mario Andretti, the sour luck, you can't really call it bad luck, continues. There doesn't seem to be too much activity around that race car.
I believe, Larry, that Andretti is simply out of fuel. I don't think they're going to try to restart the car. He has exhausted his supply of methanol and has to come in and drop out of the race. Can Gordon Johncock go the distance? This will complete lap number 148. We have 2 laps to go. Johncock is 2 miles from victory, but fuel is running very short.
Bob, just picking up on what you said, when Bob Jenkins said he was out of fuel, he meant out of fuel in the tank. There is no more available to this team, and that's the drama that begins to build here for Gordon Johncock. I'll tell you what, we aren't going to know. We just have to keep our eyes on Gordon Johncock as he tries to make it around for the final 2 times. He's got about 6 more turns left. Make it 5, make it 4 more turns now as the white flag flutters.
Gordon Johncock is on his final lap. Can he make it 2 wins in a row? Indianapolis, and now Gordon Johncock about to win the Rex Mays 150. It is a rare race that does not see a yellow, but we have had no yellows here today. Johncock drops low in turns 3 and 4. He appears to be still in control of the race. The car is under power. Here comes Gordon Johncock, and Johncock raises the hand to signify victory at Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Rex Mays 150 belongs to the Indy 500 winner, Gordon Johncock. We'll be back.
Playing a big swig of something cold to drink for Gordy Johncock. Gordy, you always say when you win it's easy, but I know there were some moments out there because of the fuel consumption.
Well, yeah, we were all right on fuel. There was one time when somebody was dumping oil out there that I almost lost it. That was the first part of the race. But the car worked real well all day. Couldn't ask for it to work any better.
Kind of a late bloomer this season. The first 2 races so-so, then you really picked it up in Indy, and total domination here.
Well, you know, we got the cars working a lot better. It takes a whole crew, a whole team to do this, you know. It takes everybody. A driver, no matter how great he is, can't do this by himself. He has to have a car to drive to do it. It just takes a team effort from everybody.
Aside from the grease and oil on the track, any other problems out there?
Well, not really. A couple close calls with a couple cars today, but nothing that was really heart-stopping.
A record book performance. Gordy Johncock in victory lane. Wife Linda is alongside, and his daughters Pammy Lee and Patsy also enjoying the victory lane celebration. Bob?
Well, Larry, I think the thing you got to talk about is what's happened with the Penske team. You know, they dominated the first 2 races of the season. They dominated the early part of the month at Indianapolis in practice and in qualifying. Then here comes Gordon Johncock to take the Indy 500, and he just totally dominates the race here. What's going on?
Well, racing is certainly a sport of inertia, and life goes on and things change, and everybody is always trying to develop new technology and new approaches to the actual races themselves with strategy. And it's just impossible to stay on top forever in Indianapolis type car racing. And I tell you, I would like to have the problems of the Penske team.
Gordon Johncock is the winner with A.J. Foyt second. We will be back.